Any of you had anything happen in your life? It kind of gave you a left turn or a detour or a, where did that come from? What on earth happened? Yeah, he's 2 hands back there. Yep, yeah, me too. Me too, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then, and during it, you're like, why me? I'm a good person, right? I'm a good person. And it's like, my God. It's only afterwards that you realize the whole thing. But, during it, it's like, God. And then you find out it's the best thing that could have ever happened to you later. You found that out? Is that kind of what you saw? Well, that's kind of James's story. And because here again, we have, a very successful person. I'm not going to take away from his story. That's his story. But normal, successful person, financial advisor, and then life happens. And it goes, but that's what I like to call, it's like, okay, you're going down your path, and then it's like, or like what Garnet was saying, okay, the guardian angel or whatever, but what I'm saying is, part of you is saying, okay, you're on the wrong path. You've got to go this other way now. It's time now. You've got to get over here. You have something you have to do. There's something you had in motion. You got to get over here now. And how do we get you over here? And sometimes it takes drastic moves to get you over there. And that's just the way it is. And sometimes, and if you're not going on the right path, it takes major things. And that's the way it is. And so we have major things that happen to us, right? And that's just the way it is. So, but I love it. They make great stories later. So we all have great stories to tell, don't we? I love it. So here we have James Nussbaumer with The Master of Everything, and his second book actually is coming out. It's at the, I think it's at the printers or about to go to the printers now, and you can actually pre-order it downstairs because it's that close. Because it's coming out very, very soon. So it's the Mastering Your Own Spiritual Freedom. But The Master of Everything, James Nussbaumer.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. And it is a pleasure to be here, let me tell you. Isn't freedom a great thing? And why is freedom such a great thing? Because doesn't it give us inner peace? And joy and happiness, real freedom. I mean real freedom, where we don't feel guilty over the way we think, where we can think the way we want. Have you noticed just all of the speakers here so far this week have their different take on spirituality and enlightenment? But neither one of them is telling you how to think. Did you notice that? Yeah. They're telling you what they are about. Unlike the world that tries to dictate to us and hand to us on a platter a couple of choices of how we should think. But the reason that, the speakers have their own take on their enlightenment and spirituality, the same as all of you do here. Because we're separated while we're in this world, so we all think a little differently. But the only thing that is not separate within us is the truth, our inner core. And sometimes expressing that truth, we have a different take on things. So if you can take the take on things that all the speakers had given you this week and use that to piece together your own puzzle for your own enlightenment, there you go. But you really don't have to learn enlightenment. It's nothing that can be learned or studied. Sure, studying helps open our mind to different possibilities. But enlightenment is always there. You've always been enlightened. You are an enlightened individual. The only problem is that since we've been born, the world has offered us and tried to suggest, strongly suggest, depending on what part of the world you live in, how to think. And that it becomes a thought system that blocks the true essence of who we are, of the truth that we really are. Consider it like a window shade in your mind that is this thought system that's pulled down, and it's blocking the light from coming into your mind to be who you are. So enlightenment and spirituality is not rocket science, man-made rocket science. Man can't tell us how to be enlightened. And that's what we speakers and we authors are writing about, how we decided to lift that window shade in our mind, what it took, and now what we see as the light's coming in. So for each one of you, when you go home, use your own take on things and don't be afraid of it. A little bit about myself, which I'll expand a little bit on what Julie had said. She really didn't say much. I too was raised with by the fear of God concept and the fire and hell concept. As a Catholic boy in the 1960s, growing up from a strong Catholic family, and don't get me wrong, my upbringing was very nice to me, and the many teachers and nuns who had given me the lessons that I needed in life were, I am appreciative towards them. But, all along, like many of the other speakers that you've heard, there was just something that just didn't seem right, I believe it was Eric yesterday had said, how can heaven be, heaven is supposed to be this blissful state of eternal bliss. And where there's eternal bliss, there can be no conflict. Well, if there's a hell, if there's an eternal hell and there's also an eternal heaven, that means conflict. So how can the fire and hell concept really be? But that's my take on some things, and that's not really what I'm going to expand on today. Mainly just a little bit about myself and how I stumbled in to these marvelous books. I'm just so proud of these books. You would not believe. The first one, The Master of Everything, that I have right here is, I've been told it's a real page turner. And it's 86,000 words, but it's very, very understandable. And I wanted to make sure my readers, because, I don't like picking up a book that someone had said the other day where it takes a couple hours to read a paragraph. But upon my 12 years of Catholic education and a little bit of college at Kent State, I went into the United States Air Force and had some great times there. And, I always wanted to be a writer ever since I was little. In fact, in my bio, if you've read it, it says, I think at age 11, I wrote my first novel, which was never published. But I'd always been a football player, and it was called Reaching the Goal. And I was always inspired by Fran Tarkenton, if anyone knows who he was. In the 1960s, his number 10 quarterbacking first at the New York Giants and then on to the Minnesota Vikings. I just loved that guy. In fact, he wrote a book for kids at the time when I was growing up in the 60s called Better Scramble Than Lose. And I thought that was a great touchy title. But my book was called Reaching for the Goal. But it was just a stepping stone for me in writing. But when I went to college and went into the Air Force, and I took all the literary areas in high school and college, but I never pursued writing. When I got out of the U.S. Air Force, I stumbled into the financial services business. And I started to do very well. And I thought I'd just give it a try for a few years. Well, during this give it a try for a few years, I started making money. Then there was cars I was buying and then house payments. And all of a sudden I had a couple children. And the years went by and 2 girls on to college. And all of a sudden, it's 25 years had gone by. I had been in this business. I started at age 25. Now here at age 50 in 2007, I crossed an illegal line in the securities industry, which actually became a state crime. The feds didn't even want me because that's how serious it was. It wasn't really serious at all, but a state judge thought it was serious. I manipulated some funds to recover money in a losing stock market from my clients and myself without the proper permissions. And So one thing led to another, and it was a serious securities violations, all over an amount of money of $100,000 that was repaid and no one lost their money. Well, a harsh judge and a bad lawyer that I had sentenced me to 10 years in prison in a state penitentiary. And you talk about being floored when something like that hits you. I had a lawyer that was known as a great trial lawyer during his younger years in practice, and he was about the same age as me. I'm 58 years old right now. And everyone told me, go see Jeff. He is the man to get you out of this problem you're in. Well, so I went to see Jeff. I trusted everything he could said, but it didn't do me any good. 6 months after I was in prison, I found out he died of a cocaine overdose. I didn't know he was having substance abuse problems when he was handling my case, and so I was literally handed on a platter to the prosecutor and the judge, who both were running for election in that year, which was an election year, and both of those are elected officials in Ohio. So I was sentenced to 10 years in prison with his long finger and pointy nose. The judge pointed his finger at me. I'm going to teach you a lesson, as I was standing there in shackles in an orange jumpsuit. And the next financial advisor is going to think twice about manipulating funds like you've done and blah, blah, blah. So off I went to prison. No chance of an early release. So anyways, after 8 years, that judge had retired, which during the time in prison, many pleas had went to him to release me early, but no go with this example setter judge. He retired going on my 8th year of being in prison. Another judge came forward out of retirement, and that my lawyer had worked out some arrangements and released me after 8 years. And yesterday was 13 months since I've been home from prison. So thank you. And I had a lot to do in the last 13 months. And you would not believe, after 8 years of being away, how much things have changed. There's no computer in prison. And this book was written by hand. I found an editor, a freelance editor on the outside down in Florida, where I was able to mail my handwritten journals to her, and she put them into manuscript form. And in 2008, I learned how to write a query letter and started writing query letters to handwritten and maybe some typing with an ill-quality typewriter that they had available in prison, to publishers and agents everywhere. And this started in 2008, and I had a friend send in the Writer's Market, if anyone knows what that is. It's a resource directory of agents and publishers. And so that started in 2008. I dedicated 2 days a week to just writing to publishers. And I had enough rejection letters I would tell people to wallpaper the entire prison. But it was in 2014, June of 2014, which I didn't know at that time yet that I was being released. I still was thinking I was going to have to endure this whole 10 years. Through some correspondence with Dolores Cannon, she offered me a contract. And so that was just brought tears to my eyes like you would not believe. It was just such a joy. And that was The Master of Everything. Both these books were written from prison. And there's a third book on its way out too, but we're not really, I might touch on that a little bit in the end. But have you ever really, were in a situation where you just didn't know what to do? What am I going to do? While I was in prison for the foolish securities violation, I call it a foolish securities violation because really foolish on my part. I should have never received that harsh sentence, but once again, on the other side, I should have never done what I had done. But while I was still in prison for this securities violation, and I was in a hardcore prison, in state penitentiaries, there's no such thing as a white-collar prison. All of my people I was around were doing life sentences for just the terrible, ugliest things you could imagine. And prison is very rough. I witnessed 7 murders in the 8 years that I was there. One I describe in detail in chapter 15 of The Master of Everything, while I was in the hole for something that is also explained in there. While I was in prison for 8 of the 10 years, and as I became consumed with my writing, I always said to myself, of the people that I need to meet and sit down and talk with one day, was Dolores Cannon. And of course, Dolores had passed away a couple of months after offering me the contract. And I was still in prison, so when I was released, I wasn't able to ever meet her, but we had corresponded, and so our minds are still in touch with each other. Actually, we're one, so, so we're together, but I wish I could have met her physically, which many of you have, and I didn't have the privilege of doing that. And another one was the late Wayne Dyer. Does anybody know Wayne Dyer? I'm a huge fan of Wayne Dyer, always have been. And once again, here's a man with a different take on things, but his purpose is to help you bring out your own take on things and lift the window shade of your mind. The teachings of inner peace and forgiveness that I write about are based on the principles contained in A Course in Miracles. Has anyone ever heard of A Course in Miracles? Okay, great. I've talked to a few people that haven't, and that's understandable. But there's no doubt in my mind that A Course in Miracles was divinely intended to enter my life. I wrote this book and the sequels entirely by longhand, like I had said, but, in an overbearing and obnoxiously loud, volatile prison environment. And, I would, like I had said, I would later arrange for the typing and editing of these books. But the project really, in the earlier years when I entered prison, just really saved me. And I'll explain in a moment how I ran into A Course in Miracles. But, first of all, what I had tried to mention a little bit ago, much of the world lives by a thought system that we're taught to live that teaches us that our body is really who we are. And I think we realize that that's not it, and that's why we're all here today and this week. We're taught that, winning is everything, and that in order to win, someone else must lose. We think that in order to find out who we really are, that we must get on our knees and repent and sacrifice. That's what we're raised on. And if the people out there that truly believe that way, then, that's okay. I'm not here to judge them and change their way of thinking. But sit quietly here for a moment and think about the world that you see around you outside of this room. Think about the world that you see and tell yourself that the real world is not like this. Okay, the real world has no buildings and there are no streets in the real world. The real world has no lights. Has no artificial lights. The real world is nothing but natural light. The real world has no darkness that ends a day. The real world has no stores that we go to buy things that we don't really need. The real world is who we are, the essence of who we are, deep within us. It's the brightness that never goes out. There is something to it when you think of something that really feels good, it's true, and you say to yourself, oh, the light went on. No, the light never went on. It's always been on. You've just lifted the window shade. That I call it an ego-based thought system that the world has taught us to grow into. But the world that you see, we really need to deny that if we want to lift that window shade to let our enlightenment be there. You can't really see both worlds in true vision because each involves a different kind of seeing. The seeing that all the speakers this week are talking about, the vision that they're talking about, their spirit guides, the guardian angels, and the point that they're trying to get to you to open your eyes is a vision that's not from your physical eyes. We don't truly want the world we see that's around us. We really don't, because, it has disappointed us over and over since time began. Doesn't history keep on repeating itself? Because we're afraid to pull that window shade up and live with our real thought system rather than the one that was made for us. The homes we've built really don't shelter us. The roads that we make really lead us nowhere. And no city that we build can withstand the crumbling assault of time. Everything we see in this physical world is going to one day perish. And All that we need to do in order to exchange the world, this world, for the real world, is to have a willingness to learn that the world we made is false. It's not about who we are. And it's not that we can get out of it by going over it. We just need to let go of it. And therefore, when we let go of it, it's not there. The same as letting go of it means pulling up that window shade, letting the light in. But you see, while we're in this world, we're always going to dream of peace and freedom before we can have it, before we can awaken to it, if you will. There was a couple of people here that I've talked to downstairs that I didn't really mention it to them after talking to them, but they're awakening. One woman had said that as a birthday gift to herself, she brought herself here. Okay, well, if the birthday was an excuse for her to pull that window shade up, and I'm going to this conference, she said. Another man having problems in a family situation decided, I got to go and be around like-minded minds. It was a voice, you could say, a thought, some pure thought that said, I need to get to this conference. Back in 1995, I know it was 1995 for a certain reason because just something that was going on in my life at the time. I was browsing the self-help section in a bookstore in Port Richey, Florida, and I stumbled upon Dr. Wayne W. Dyer's book called Your Erroneous Zones. And it was probably about the time I got turned on to Wayne Dyer because I really needed the help. And in the financial services business, it was staying motivated was the thing. So we're always reading self-help books, and they were recommended, things that were recommended, and so I read everything of from all the masters themselves, and some of them I agreed with, some of them I didn't. But when I stumbled upon Your Erroneous Zones, I immediately connected with Wayne Dyer. I just knew that his message was for me. I just knew it. I told myself that, that this guy is right on. Where have I been? But in the weeks and the months ahead, I eventually purchased every one of his books and dove into everyone. And I'm a as far as music goes, I'm a Billy Joel fan, and I tell people I know every word that Billy Joel has ever written. But with books, I'm a Wayne Dyer fan, and I can say I know every word he's written too. So, there's a connection there, and it's sad to see that he's gone as well, or transitioned. But not only did I read and study all of the material from Wayne Dyer, but also of those that he had recommended. I figured, well, if Wayne's recommending someone else, then that's got to be for me too. And they were all trying to prove to me that the light was trying to get in the window, and that my window shade was pulled down. All I needed to do was pull it, let it up, and let the light in. But for some reason, I was afraid to do that. Even with all the reading I was doing, I just couldn't get the window shade pulled up to let the light in. I chose to continue to operate by the world's thought system, which I call the ego-based mind. And as I read Wayne Dyer and all the others that he recommended, I noticed that they always mentioned this publication called A Course in Miracles. And I said to myself, I've got to check that out. What is this, A Course in Miracles? Something that's going to teach me to make miracles, create miracles? What is this? And I've never been a procrastinator. I'm always a go-getter, a doer. And I just let it twirl around in the back of my mind. I did nothing. And again, I would hear mention of this Course in Miracles. Oh, yeah, one of these days I'm going to have to go down to the bookstore and check it out. Why didn't I? I don't know. Why didn't I? So I'd put this Course in Miracles on the back burner of my mind, I guess you could say. And again, over and over, I would hear the mention, A Course in Miracles. Somewhere I'd hear it. Oh yeah, I'll have to get to it one of these days. Well, by this time, with what was going on with business and everything that was going on in my life, panic and turmoil was setting in, and I was just severely frustrated. And frustration was what I was about every day. My business was going down the tubes. I was facing felony charges, and I just was about to give up. And, I just didn't know what to do. And what led me to do what I did to manipulate these funds was I got a stock market tip on the sure thing, okay? So I trusted this sure thing, but for some reason I wouldn't trust going to find A Course in Miracles and seeing what this was. I trusted the sure thing, which you know where that landed me. 10 years in prison. And so the plan had failed, and I had hit rock bottom, and I'd really hit rock bottom. And it was a very, very shaky time for me. But at age 50, in 2007, I became a prisoner of the state of Ohio, and anything that could go wrong or go against me did. But I was willing to, put up with it for a while, because there was something inside of me that was telling me that, this has to be for a while. Anyway, for a while. So I just knew that I'm going to have to put up with whatever's coming at me. And, also, too, I had no choice in the matter. Behind a double razor wire fence and inside of prison walls, there's nothing else I could do but just accept the fact of being a prisoner and moving on from there. But on that cold morning of February 1st, 2007, I was transported in chains to Lorain Correctional Facility, and I felt as exhausted and uncertain as ever before, and just really weak, and just terribly weak, and just but I hadn't lost the sense of some promising hope, something that hit me while I was in the county jail waiting to be transported to prison. Something was just telling me that everything's going to be okay. You're going to have to gut through this for a while. And so there was something that I was holding on to. I say that in my book that it was a voice, but I explain what the voice is. It really wasn't a voice like my voice talking to you. It was thought, just pure thought. So nothing that I would hear with my ears, just I would feel in my psyche, something that was just no doubts to this thought, that what this thought was going to be true. And so, Lorain Prison was going to hold me for reception and intake for a period of 3 to 6 months to decide on a security level where I was going to be placed. And Ohio has 33 prisons, so at this place they were going to decide where I was going to go. And so in that year alone, to give you an example of the overcrowding, Ohio sent away 33,000 prisoners that year alone. It just unbelievably overcrowded. But for the time being, I would remain at Lorain and up on the north coast of Ohio, right on near Lake Erie. And though I'd never been posed an escape risk or as violent, but I would be in maximum security, locked in a cell with another individual 24/7 for that temporary time period until they decided where I needed to go, allowing to take a shower twice a week, march to what we called the chow hall 3 times a day, and that was it, locked in a cell. And I actually spent about 3 months there. But after a buzz haircut and an issue of prison clothing, I was taken to prison house number 4, where I'd spend the next few to several months. As I watched the guard slide the huge key into the heavy steel door that was really about that thick to the prison house, and this long key that was just, I'd never seen a key like this before. The door to this prison house was kind of like a vault door at a safe in a bank. It was like this thick. And so solid steel. And as he opened the door, I said to myself, this is it, as I was imagining what prison was going to be like. And as soon as he opened the door, before he opened the door, first of all, he had said, now I want you to go straight to the cell that you're going to be assigned to, and don't pay any attention to the other inmates that are going to try to harass you as being a new one. But as he slowly swung open the vault door, just insanely loud blasts of noise, volume just threw me right back. It just, as soon as he opened that door, it's unbelievable noise. And that would go on 24 hours a day, maybe a few hours at night, but mostly young kids right out of high school. And it's just unbelievably loud. And in the prison house would be about 260 prisoners in that one prison house. And most prisons have about 8 to 10 prison houses in the entire prison. So But the circular design of this prison where I was being held at for the time had 2 tiers called ranges that went all the way around the outside of the outside walls, and down below was like a pit area, and first level, second level, third level, and it wouldn't be uncommon at all to see someone thrown over the balcony down into the range. But so it was just total hell. And I tell myself, when I was looking around, this is certainly a lion's den. And I could see that I was going to have to quickly decide what kind of a lion I was going to have to be to take care of myself in there. And I also kind of jokingly said to myself, because I've always been one to say even one-liners to myself, that, I can see this is not the place where the lion and the lamb are going to lie down together. So I knew I had to toughen up in my own way. So after 60 days, I was finally notified that in a few weeks later that I would be transferred to a medium security prison called Richland, which was great for me because I had 2 adult daughters that would only be about an hour's drive for them to come visit their locked up father, and which they needed that too. They were so upset with what was going on, and that would have been such a great thing to be living that, in prison that close to them where they could visit me maybe a couple times a week was originally our plan. But a few weeks later then, and on the morning of that transfer, the state had changed their plans for me. Because of overcrowding, it's not unusual for plans to be changed. I was loaded onto an old rickety bus with about 50 other prisoners, and we headed in the opposite direction, 3 hours away, to a prison called Belmont in southern Ohio. And Belmont is full of gang activity and has the nickname Gladiator School. But while loaded on this bus and going to Belmont 3 hours away, shackled, handcuffed in an orange jumpsuit, interlocking arms with the person sitting next to you on the bus like that and chained like this together, so there's no way you're going to hijack that bus. And so when I arrived at Belmont, it certainly was a gladiator school. And when I arrived there, it really wasn't what I expected, but what really is in life, what we expect of it. And on my first day there, I right away noticed 8 blood-battled fights, where guys were being dragged off to the hole. And unlike Lorraine, though, at Belmont, there were no cells. The regular holding quarters was, say, a room just like this. So this really resembles it. And the guard station would be like, say, right here where the podium is. And here would be the bedding area, double bunks, top bunk, bottom bunk, 30 inches apart from each other, one after another, all the way down. And at the foot of the bed would be an aisleway, then more. So imagine looking at this room with nothing but double bunks just everywhere, 30 inches apart, with big, huge mercury round lights that come down. And one of my bunks at one of the times, I was always on a top bunk. It'd be like I was under in a tanning salon. In fact, I wish I would have been rather than there. But Belmont had 272 prisoners in each one of these houses, and there was 8 houses there. So there was about 2,400 prisoners at Belmont. And, so being a medium security level prison for approximately 7 hours of the day, depending on if there wasn't any violent actions going on that day, the inmates were allowed to roam the prison yard. The prison yard would be like, this is one house, and then outside of here would be 8 others, so you could mingle around and maybe go to the library or the gymnasium. But by the way, the library was nothing but a walk-in closet about the size of this stage. And let me just tell you that walking the yard for about 7 hours a day was really where you had to have as a gladiator, had to have your shield and your sword ready to go. Because if you didn't. But following an 11-day confinement that I had spent in segregation, known as the hole is pretty much like what you see in the movies. It's just a terrible place. I was hit on the back of the head, assaulted, and I had stitches put in the back of my head, hit with a copper pipe that another inmate had gotten from maintenance. But I was being recruited to join a gang, and that was their way of saying, you're going to join our gang. But of course I didn't. And so I went down. There was a guard nearby that saw it and came over, and I was stitched up. And so I had to go to the hole because when something like this happens, they throw both parties in the hole while they do an investigation to see what was going on. So after 11 days, I was found not guilty of any foul play and was let go. But during that 11 days in the hole is when I witnessed a murder in the cell next to me. A 47-year-old white man was beaten to death by a young black man's hands. And the only reason I mention white and black like that is because in prison, the racial problem between white and blacks is just unbelievable. It's just a constant war. But following that 11-day confinement in the hole, I was moved back to my prison house, but at a different bunk, because once you leave that bunk, they pack you up, put your stuff, whatever belongings you have, into a vault, and then when you get out, they bring it back to you to a new location. So while I was laying on my top bunk, trying to just recover from being in the hole for that 11-day period, which, I was just down, out, right, weak, and emotionally, physically, everything. Just emotionally and physically the same, just very, very weak. But the yard was open when a fire drill enacted when I was trying to lay there and rest. So when a fire drill happens, you got to either join the fire drill or go do something if the yard is open. So I decided I would escape this fire drill and wander into the prison library. So I left the scene and found my way into the library, which was, not part of the fire drill. So I needed something and anything just to lift the fog, bring my emotions up, just put some strength into me. And in the library, most of the books are outdated, given to prison libraries from maybe local libraries that need to unload some of their publications that are getting outdated and such like that. Maybe different volunteer organizations get boxes of books and, donate them to the library, whatever. But as I was roaming the library in the state that I was in, I noticed on the shelf, and it was such a sigh of relief. I remember that day. There was Dr. Wayne W. Dyer's book called Real Magic. And I just was in tears. I was so glad to see Wayne. So I checked that out, and I'd read this book on the outside too before I went to prison, because I'd read all of his books, but I needed to read this again. And so I took 2 weeks to read that book, and his book again, which greatly lifted me. And but upon returning Real Magic, I searched a section of philosophical books. And like I'd said, the library was only about the size of this stage, so maybe there's a section like right here, and I was looking at it, and all of a sudden this blue book was there, and unusual blue book, and I pulled it off the shelf, and it dropped and landed right on my right foot, and I bent over to pick it up, and faded gold lettering on the front cover said, "A Course in Miracles." And I was like, I couldn't believe this. Is this right? And I was like shaking right away. I was shaking. I was looking over my shoulder, making sure no other inmate was going to come close to me to, And by the way, here is that book. And as you can see, we'll talk about this here in a little bit. I was able to make arrangements later from the librarian to get it out of there, but that was after a couple more months. So I immediately checked this out of the library for 2 weeks. My way of thinking was that I'm just going to read the entire content and just word for word, whether I understand it or not. But, as this godsend flashed before me, I was like, I paged through it real quickly, and I was like, reading some words. Whew, this stuff's a foreign language. It's so abstract, the material. And for you that know of A Course in Miracles, you'll know that. But so, and as I there's a feeling inside of me was just like, it was just unbelievable, like something was just happening. I'd read a sentence, I didn't understand it, but I felt connected to this somehow. Something was going on. But I knew right then that whatever was in the pages here, that I knew, I could just tell right away standing there in the library, shaking, that this was written for me. I figured it was written just for me. And that's the feeling I had, like that pure thought I was talking about, that voice, which was just thought, it was telling me this was written for you. And by the way, in my book, I explain in The Master of Everything that my search for answers really began around the year 1975, and when I was graduating high school. And I paged through the copyright page, which I always do on books, and I noticed the copyright to be dated 1975. And but at least for now, I would say, I'm going to just read every word of this in this 2-week period, whether I understand it or not, and get it back to the library, because if you don't return a book from the library in due time, that warrants about 7 days in the hole. So I wasn't going to jeopardize going to the hole again, but I thought for later I would figure out a way to. But I noticed also in the book, and I went to the back where libraries put that little thing, it shows where you check. The book had arrived at the library 2 years prior to me getting there, and not once was it ever checked out by another inmate. I was the first inmate to check this book out of the library. And I'll talk a little bit about what A Course in Miracles actually is, just a little bit, because my book goes into it. I don't want to give too much away, but as I flipped through the book and feeling, eager and rushed, and I was going like this, and I stopped at a section that caught my eye that was smaller than normal print of the book. And I'll read that to you, what it says. It's just a couple of lines. It says, "This course is a beginning, not an end. No more specific lessons are assigned, for there is no need of them. Henceforth, hear but the voice for God. He will direct your efforts, telling you exactly what to do, how to direct your mind, and when to come to Him in silence, asking for His sure direction and His certain word." This message then directed me to go to another page in the book, page 487, and I did what it said, and all I can say to you is that I did what the lesson on that page told me to do. I examined the inside of this raggedy old thing here, and of course, by the way, you'll notice I had to while I was in there, put my name with magic marker on there because of theft. If they know that you're close to something like I was with this, they're going to steal it from you. So I figured, my name right there and my prison number, nobody's going to take it. I mean, you can't really get rid of that unless you black it out. So, but then I was able to put some tape around it, and it's just beat up. It's yellow, nicotine stained. It's just really ugly, but it looks ugly. But for me, it's always going to be. And I study from this every day, and it's just a great, great publication of opening that window shade that I've talking about. But as you know, there was a name and a phone number on the inside of this too, and it was blacked out. Look in magic marker by the prison. It seems as though, and it had a woman's name from Sedona, Arizona, that says, "I hope this publication finds its way to you." Now, sure, when she wrote that in there, she didn't know that me particular, but whoever would accept that book. And the way I figured it out was maybe this book ended up in an estate sale somewhere, or maybe some kind of social club it wound up, or maybe even a garage sale. Someone the other day said that they were turned on by a book they paid 25 cents for at a garage sale. But so I knew that this book was for me, this publication, and it's not one of these publications that you can just read once and put it aside. But this is the condensed version. There's 3 volumes to A Course in Miracles, and the condensed version of A Course in Miracles contains the 669-page text. Then there's a 488-page workbook for students and a 92-page manual for teachers, it's called. And really, teachers means everyone in the world. We're all teachers to each other. Speakers up here, we're teachers to you. But you, the audience, are teachers to us back as well. We authors, when we write a book, we're teachers to you, but you readers are teachers back to us because you're teaching us how to write for you. So it's constant. Everyone's a teacher in some sense. So, like I had said, at first I had found the words extremely difficult because it's quite abstract material, and there's no correct interpretation to A Course in Miracles, but it's exciting, and it's hard to explain. It just opens you up. But I knew to the core of me that for some strange reason, this publication was destined to show up in my life. And among my questions was, why didn't I find this sooner? Why was I procrastinating years before when Wayne Dyer would mention A Course in Miracles? Well, I finally came up with that answer after I dove into the course, I call it for short. And it's simple. Like I said, spirituality, enlightenment, it's not rocket science. The simple answer to why I never researched this before is that I wasn't ready. I just wasn't ready. But after all, I was in prison and I had plenty of time to absorb this. And if I would have found this book on the outside before all this went down, I probably never would have taken the time to dive into it like I did while I was in prison. In fact, I know that I wouldn't have. And that's why my spirit guide inside of me, which I call the Holy Spirit, that I'll mention in a little bit. And I use the term Holy Spirit because that's what people are used to. Like someone had said yesterday with her guardian angels, and that's in the Bible, but it's the Holy Spirit with me is just, it's the Spirit, and it's holy. It's not a white dove. It's not a physical thing. It's whatever you want to call it. It's you. It's not something outside of you that you got to bring to you. It's you that you need to listen to and follow and not be afraid. Because if it's the truth about what you need to do or a decision you need to make and you hear this voice, then it must be what you need to do. So, I had all this time and to absorb it. And I knew I had to get another copy of this book, but because I couldn't be going to the library all the time to renew it. Plus, I wanted my own copy where it was going to be mine for the next 10 years, 9 3/4 years I had left to do in prison. So I initially thought of writing my longtime friend Ron, who had stuck by me by coming forward after I went to prison and said, "Hey, Jim, listen," he wrote me a letter. "Whatever you need, I'm going to take care of you. I'll send it to you. Whatever I can, I will take care of you." And he wrote me consistently twice a week. Usually, most of the time, filled with postage-embossed envelopes to help me write to publishers. Okay, and which was a thing that I couldn't come up with in prison, was envelopes to really send things out. But Ron would take care of me on things like this. And I thought of contacting Ron and say, "Hey, Ron, can you, look up this Course in Miracles for me? And if you can find it on Amazon or something, would you send it to me?" But I couldn't. But I didn't know if it was still in print. Because, I had no communication in prison, no computer. You don't know what's going on. And I didn't know if it was still in print. I mean, I couldn't, if Ron found a used one, he couldn't send that in to me because there's a strict law in prison that books can only come from a vendor like Amazon because of drug smuggling and all that other kind of stuff that goes on. No one can send you a used book. So I decided that the timing wasn't right, and I was just going to hold off on notifying Ron. And to do this, I would just wait a little bit while longer. And I just, and also too, in the back of my mind, I didn't want to be excited and have him thinking that I was vulnerable and fell for some, save the day self-help material. And so it was best I needed to just keep this private for now. But, and speaking of Ron, most people don't realize the appreciation that an inmate has for the outside support system of someone to send them the things that they need, especially someone like me that was trying to do something here to get on self-improvement. And it's if you don't have help on the outside sending you the things in that they're allowed to do, then it can be a really tough way to go in addition to everything else that goes on in there. But about 3 months of renewing the course from the prison library, I was feeling just a oneness in these words like you would not believe. After about 3 months, I was becoming one with this book. I didn't want to keep taking it back to the library and then waiting another week to go back and get it again. In fact, there was a couple of times where I thought maybe I hide it somewhere in the library, because I didn't want to take a chance of someone else finding it. So this was after about 3 months, and I asked a librarian who had worked there as a state employee since that prison had opened in 1995 if she would work with me, if there's any way that I could have this. And then I asked her again if she ever heard of A Course in Miracles, and she abruptly said, well, the librarian, first of all, was just a prison guard. We just called her the librarian. And answered me, and if I asked her if she ever heard of the Course, and she said, "A Course in what?" She never even heard of it. You think a miracle's going to get you out of here? She snapped at me. And so, but I had to do something. I had to at least try to get a copy of this course. And so while I was at my bunk one morning in this loud house like this with all these bunks I'd explained with these young punks mostly, 18 to probably 25 years old, reading the book, these age-yellowed pages, studying it, I was called to go see the house sergeant. And my request a few months prior for a bed move had finally come through. I was being moved to a much quieter section of the prison that I had put in for a little while ago, which was for seniors, for older people, I thought, like me. Well, then I come to find out that a senior in prison is considered age 35 and over. So I was moved to this other prison house, age 35 and over. And upon arriving, to my new bunk location, A96, I just remember that bunk location. I plopped my property onto the mattress, top bunk. I always had a top bunk because they reserved the bottom bunks for ones with health or health problems. As I plopped my property right on top of the mattress, on the springs, my mattress and all that, next to our double bunk was a rusty old wall locker, and it had initials and graffiti scratched in it dated back to the 1960s. I know I'd said that the prison opened in 95, but older prisons that had closed had moved equipment into the newer prisons and such. But so I would share this cabinet with my bunkie, and each of us would possess one side of the cabinet, of one side of just a wall locker, just a normal locker that you would see. So we'd each possess one side of it. But the top half of my locker cabinet was terribly dusty, which it's filth in prison anyway. So I decided that as I began to wipe it down, I noticed what appeared to be a thick book underneath a beat-up rag. And as I removed the cloth, I was shocked to find out a very clean, minimally tarnished copy of A Course in Miracles. Now, keep in mind that, a Bible in prison is everywhere. I mean, if a prisoner, you don't need to own your own Bible because there's one there, there's one here. In fact, there's 10 on that table there. They're everywhere, okay? But nowhere is there A Course in Miracles. In fact, I've asked, even some of the more intellectual inmates that were there and people that seemed to be professionals on the outside and that, if they had ever heard of it, no one had ever heard of A Course in Miracles. So, but there it was, and right away I said to myself, this has got to be some kind of joke. 'Cause I said to my new bunkie, who was right here on our bunk trying to take a nap, and I says, "Hey, man, is this yours?" "No, dude, that's yours. Just keep it alone. Just leave it." And I was just nervous. I'm like, man, I can't believe this. I just can't believe this. I was shaking. I circled around. Hey, is this anybody's book? Is this anybody's book? No, and my new bunkie, who I didn't even know yet, was trying to take a nap, and he said, "Dude, I told you, leave it alone. It's yours." That book had been sitting there for ages. His old bunkie, who had left a few hours, because that's how quick they get you in an empty spot, so overcrowded. His old bunkie that had left a few hours ago was released from prison, had used that book and put a towel over it just to set his girlfriend's picture on it to make it certain, like a type of a shelf. And he didn't read the book. It was just sitting there for God knows how long on top of that cabinet. It was never used. You could tell by when I paged through it. I mean, I noticed maybe one little coffee stain or something here, but it was just clean white pages compared to this age-yellowed thing. So when I got that book, I figured, okay, it's mine. I was still shaking. I got to come up with some kind of plan. I says, I still need to have another book in case this one's stolen. You're just so paranoid with things to happen. So I did work out a deal with the librarian, because I ended up going to work for her at the library and to do things. And so she allowed me to take this with me and to keep it. So this library book, so what I did, my plan was, okay, I'm going to study and I'm going to do my writing and all this out of this book. If it gets stolen, it was the prison's anyway, and the new one that I found, I'm going to bury at the bottom of my footlocker under all my stuff. Just keep it down at the bottom for the next 9 3/4 years. Because I was thinking when I got out of prison, I wouldn't be able to find this in a bookstore. I didn't know. So that was my plan. So it did. It stayed buried. I never pulled it out, only but a couple times just to see the clean white pages. It was so bright compared to this thing, I'd be like, whoa. And I'd put it back down in the bottom of my footlocker just to keep it safe, because theft is just a terrible thing. Many people wouldn't want this to read this, but just because I like it and they see that I'm studying it all the time, they'll steal it from you. So you have to be careful with those kind of things. But so I just, I'd already been a student of the course, like I'd said, for about 3 months, and now this book suddenly becomes my own private copy. So, this was just like I was high. Because now I know I have my own book now of the Course in Miracles, because I'd already accepted it as my lifelong pursuit, my lifelong study. And I just couldn't believe it, so I was asking myself, how did it get on this prison? How did it get on this prison wall locker? I mean, why not some other locker? Why this one? Why was I moved to this section and not maybe over there, or whatever? No one knew that I was involved with this library copy, and it couldn't have been a joke. No one knows. And the best that I could come up with was say, I'm not supposed to know the answer to that. I'm just supposed to move on. It was put there because it needed to be put there. But for me, A Course in Miracles is just not some other how-to or inspirational self-help book. No, it's not. But it is about how to lead one to gain positive outlook. And for me, it has become my personal teacher. So it's been 10 years now that I've been a student of the Course, and it doesn't replace the Bible, and I never want to say that I'm against the way the Bible is, but I am against the way some people interpret the Bible. Okay, but the Course in Miracles helps me to interpret certain things that I want in the Bible, that's what this part in Exodus means, but not that I use the Bible, the Course in Miracles for that, but if I want to, it does. So it helps me clearly understand the Bible when I want it to. But as I said earlier, it really took me till then to be ready. Many people think that A Course in Miracles might be an attempt to form a cult. But these individuals are totally misinformed, because A Course in Miracles states right up front that it is not a cult, because a cult needs an idol, a guru. It's not a cult. How many faiths out there have an idol? There's no idol in it. A Course in Miracles doesn't ask you to give them your money. In fact, there is no them. In my book, I explain about the author and how she channeled this information. She was a psychologist, Helen Schuchman, at the University of Cambridge, and that's a long story, and I don't have time to talk about that today, but a couple paragraphs in my book about the history of A Course in Miracles. But no, A Course in Miracles has no rules about dress or diet. A Course in Miracles has no rules about things that you might expect from a cult. So, these people that want to call it a cult are just afraid to open the window and let the light in, because if you read A Course in Miracles, and I don't want to, and my books too, it will help you open the window. But it opens our true vision to our source, which can only be God. We can call it what we want, and once again, I call it God because, that's what I'm used to. It doesn't matter. My source is God. Is he this man upstairs up there with a white beard and throwing lightning bolts? No, he's just my source. My source. Okay, and that's God. And the Course, it teaches us that we all have a unique purpose while we're here. And that's what I'm getting from this abstract material. It gives us the guidance to understand how to proceed with that purpose. My lifelong commitment to studying and teaching the Course has really opened a new door for me in unleashing a flow of universal intellect, just seeding itself into my true essence. And what is my true essence again? It's that part of me that's where the light's coming in. It's the real me without the thought system that the world has tried to make for me. So it gives you the universal intellect that you just cannot explain. You can't even hardly write about it. All you can do is maybe send some messages. But this gift has been such a gift to me. And while I was in prison, I would say that it was also my friend Ron, who was taking care of me while I was in there, was such a gift to me too, supporting me and helping me with, giving me updates as he worked with attorneys to do the necessary tasks to set me free, because everyone knows that I shouldn't have been sentenced harshly like that. But then on the other hand, we've all talked about it, might be racing through your mind right now too. Had I only been sentenced to maybe a year in prison, or maybe just given probation, probation would have been the more appropriate sentence. But had I only been sentenced to that kind, Do you think I would have took on this writing? No. Do you think I would have dove into this? And no. So, we can all understand why that happens. But I knew that while I was in there, I was very fortunate, even though at the time I started and dove into the course, and I still had 9 3/4 years to go. It's when you think about it, but there's that ego thinking again, 9 3/4 years. Oh, no, I'm so depressed. But then when I pull the window shade up, hey, that's okay. Man, I got a lot to do in the next 9 3/4 years. There, who is that talking? Okay. So, but I was fortunate, I would tell myself that, in 9 3/4 years, at the worst case scenario, I'm going to walk out these prison gates. When I was around people, men doing life sentences that were never going to be able to take their grandchildren out for ice cream, men whose families left them and just decided not to have a relationship with someone who was going to spend the rest of their life in prison. But see, I knew my stop was temporary, and I remember Ron saying to me when he'd come to visit me, before I even announced to him that I fell into this love with this Course in Miracles, he'd visit me and we'd sit across from each other in the visiting room, and he'd say, Jim, there's a glow about you. I mean, you're in prison. You just look so inspired, just like you're glowing. Why are you so happy? I said, Ron, one of these days I'll explain. And I would just keep it simple and say, I found a way to get through this. And then we'd talk about, his problems in life, and we'd keep it that way, or not really his problems, but what was going on. And, and he'd keep me posted and updated about, hey, there's this new thing coming out called Facebook, and, there's this new thing called, hey, they're coming out with this new phone. It's a computer you can carry around with you. So, we would talk about those kind of things, but I didn't expand about the Course to Ron, because in my mind, that voice again, that pure thought, was just telling me there's no need to explain it now because he's not ready to hear that from me. So I'd keep it that way. But these books that I have authored, from the volatile and often violent den of the cell block, it's about you and it's about me. The late Carl Jung, I don't know if anybody knows who he is, died many years ago, psychologist. He had said that, if we go deep within ourselves, we'll find that we're all related. This was years ago, though, but, we've grown since Carl Jung's discoveries. A Course in Miracles tries to teach us get the point across to us that if we go deeper than that, what Carl Jung was saying, and we go deeper and deeper, we'll find that we're more than just related. We're one. We're all the same. But in this world, we're separated. But my book, up here, The Master of Everything, and I don't know if I paged through it or just to fan it a little bit. It's 86,000 words. The margins are narrow, but it's very understandable, like I had said. And this book is about truth, the main roots of the oak tree, strength, producing the acorn, and love, the thought helping the seed to sprout. Its outer expression is the tree, and the process is life, otherwise known as what I call God, my source. This book that I've written has a purpose to make you aware of the thought of God. Once again, there's that thought, which will awaken you so you can sprout. Think of God as that one thought of creation. Not everyone is ready for the message that I give in this book, but you may be someday, but many are ready. And I really, truly hope by writing this book to make your life better, by only continuing to show that what I have learned, and not by a preaching mode, and that you understand that we're all here for a reason, and that things happen for a reason. There's reasons why you're sitting in this room that you don't have to share with anybody, but you know why you're here. You know what you're trying to get a hold of inside so you can go home and be a better person within yourself. But I have discovered by my studies through the Course and what my book, through its many examples and anecdotes, and there's a lot of experiences of my prison life that you may find fascinating. But we come on to find that truth We all have our different takes on spirituality, like I said, but the message is the same. It's truth. And what is truth? Truth is unalterable. It's eternal. And it's unambiguous. It applies to everyone and everything. Truth can't be changed. There's no stretching it. It doesn't stretch. There's no, almost the truth. Truth is what it is. A better idea of truth can't be offered to you to choose from by the world. The world offers a flood of false images that we've been trained to believe suit us. And those false images are, we look in the mirror some mornings and we say, hey, I look like crap. But then you walk out the door and someone says, man, you look great today. Well, the way we project the world isn't the same. The way I'm projecting the world isn't the same way. We all project the world differently. All of our worlds are different. But the only thing that doesn't change is truth. And that's where your spirit is at, your Holy Spirit. So I hope that you'll discover that in my book you get some momentum to go ahead and proceed with an open mind so that you can be more giving of yourself and give yourself more credit. And someone else yesterday had said about the power in the brain, that somewhere in the brain, the hardware of our body, there's a spot in there that allows us to get over any adversity that the world dishes out for you. There's no problem that you cannot get through. And I hope that by reading of my experiences and how I've overcome what I've overcome, that when you're faced with adversity somewhere out there when you go home, that you may think back to what I had been saying or imagine in your own mind of what I must have went through, because you can get through anything. And at God's speed, you can get through it. And what is God's speed? It's the speed of God. Does that mean it's fast? There is no fast or slow with God, right? It's just God's speed. The 8 years that I was in was God's speed. He figured, well, okay, it's time now. So whenever you're tempted to undertake a useless journey that doesn't just seem right, or in that mode like I had said earlier, do you ever get in a situation where you just don't know what to do? If you get in that frame of mind and you just can't figure it out and you don't know which road to take at the crossroads, at the branch in the road, I offer you a few words that I've come up with that you don't have to remember it exactly the way it is, because I don't expect you to write it down. It's 2 quick sentences, but it makes a lot of sense. Just say these words in the form of a prayer or meditation if you prefer. Some people aren't comfortable with meditation and are more comfortable with prayer, and that's okay. But these words go like this when you're confused about something. These glimpses of reality lead me home, and where else could I rather go? What other need do I have other than to awaken and realize that I'm already at home? I like to use the example of the Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy was traveling through Oz and the witches and the scarecrow and the fake wizard and all this. But when she woke up in Kansas, she had never left Kansas. She'd been home all along. So is this a trip through Oz that we're making? And are we still at home? We've never left. When our body dies, many like to say that the spirit goes somewhere. Well, but isn't somewhere a place that's, though unspecified, which indicates a location? We can contemplate the meaning of the spirit till the end of time, and always to be led back to spirit as thought. I know you haven't heard any of the speakers here today say a spirit looks like a ghost in a white sheet over there. So no, we can't. And isn't that what the world has taught us? And of course, as kids, but we're always led back to spirit as thought, that pure thought that I was telling you about earlier, that voice inside me. A Course in Miracles teaches us this, and this is really valuable. The Course in Miracles teaches us that mind represents the activating agent of spirit, supplying it its creativeness. Aren't we creative people? but we're not creative when we have the window shade pulled down. And so there's no reason to be afraid to pull it up because we're afraid to create. We're afraid for different reasons. We might embarrass ourselves or whatever. And when the term mind is capitalized, capital M, in its most vast sense, it means God, the one mind of creation. No split apart, nothing separate to it. One mind. In the unified spirit of God's one child, all of us, the one mind of God, one light that extends, is what I call the Son of God. And that is the goal of this book. And it wasn't until my 5th year of serious daily involvement in A Course in Miracles while still in prison that I'd struck a chord within myself. Suddenly, it seemed as though, really, it was a gradual process, but now that I look back, I realized I was actually making decisions thinking from the Holy Spirit, the extended thought of God. In my next book, Mastering Your Own Spiritual Freedom, you'll come to your own understanding as to why Jesus really entered what I call the dream of separation, comparable to Oz, that we could say, or what we're calling the world today. And it's something that we've been projecting. And in book 3 of the series, which is not out yet, you're going to learn that the only way we can give our mind is to give of our mind is to extend it. And that's what we're all doing here, is we're extending to each other. And the 3rd book is called And Then I Knew My True Abundance, but we don't have that ready, but it's going to be coming soon. And it invites you to experience the abundance it's the signature of your true free will, the life that you deserve. Your true free will happens when you lift that window shade up and let the light in. The Holy Spirit will whisper truth right into you as you go along when you open that window shade. Let the light in. And I hope that you, with all this understood, I really do hope that you will join me in my subsequent books that I call the Master of Everything series. And I offer you all I can be. I really do. And I have tremendous faith in the real you. Thank you, and God bless.